Hey guys, how y'all doing? Welcome to another episode of Hockey on the Spot with Brandon Barenfeld. I'm Brandon Barenfeld. Thank y'all for joining me. This is episode 154 of Hockey on the Spot. And for today, we're going to continue with the NHL's 30 teams in 30 days. And for today's video, we're going to talk about the Tampa Bay Lightning. And the Tampa Bay Lightning are one interesting team to talk about this year because going into the season, they missed the playoffs during 2013. Going into the season, they were not expected to do much at all. They were not expected to be a playoff team. They had gotten Ben Bishop at the trade deadline last year. There were a lot of questions about their goaltending, and then all of a sudden, as the season progresses, Ben Bishop basically turns into Superman. He becomes one of the best goaltenders in the league. He was their best player all season long. And the Lightning were just such a consistent team under head coach John Cooper. John Cooper, what he's managed to build in Tampa Bay, he was a nominee for Coach of the Year. But for the Lightning fought all season long and fought their way to making the playoffs. And it didn't come easy. A lot of disappointment happened as the season continued. Like, for example, they would end up losing their eventual captain, Steven Stamkos, to a leg injury that kept him out up until after the trade deadline. He missed a large portion of the season. Obviously, Marty St. Louis was the captain at the time. And while Stamkos was still out, at the trade deadline after the Olympics, during the Olympics, Marty St. Louis, their longtime veteran and one of their franchise players, went up to general manager Steve Yzerman during the Olympics and said that after the Olympics was over, he wanted to trade out of Tampa Bay, and there was only one team he wanted to go to, and that was the New York Rangers. So all trade deadline long, a trade was in the works for St. Louis to go to the Rangers, and eventually it did happen. Marty St. Louis would go to the New York Rangers in exchange for Ryan Callahan, a first-round pick, and a second-round pick. I believe that was the trade with a conditional second-round pick that would turn into a first-round pick if the Rangers made it to the Eastern Conference Finals, which they did. So it became a first-round pick, and the Rangers, however, would get a conditional second-round pick if Ryan Callahan was re-signed. But ultimately, their long-time veteran and franchise player and then captain Marty St. Louis was dealt to the New York Rangers. They get Ryan Callahan, and Ryan Callahan brought a much different dimension to the Tampa Bay Lightning. And he actually played very well when he came over, better than St. Louis was doing with the Rangers during the rest of the regular season, up until the playoffs, where Ryan Callahan didn't even have a point, and Marty St. Louis went on to lead the Rangers in scoring in the playoffs. But they would get Steven Stamkos back after the trade deadline. But then, with 3 games to go in the regular season, after the Lightning had clinched the playoffs, Ben Bishop suffers a season-ending injury. It was an arm injury with 3 games remaining. Anders Lindback stepped in, and he was excellent in the final 3 games. The Lightning knew they were going to be playing the Montreal Canadiens in round number 1, but it was just a matter of who was going to get home ice advantage. Ultimately, Lindback's strong play rewarded the Lightning home ice advantage. They just barely got home ice advantage, finishing 1 point ahead of the Montreal Canadiens on the final day of the season. So overall, the record for the Lightning at the end of the year, 46, 27, and 9. Good enough for 101 points. Second in the Atlantic Division and third in the Eastern Conference. What a turnaround year for the Tampa Bay Lightning after 2 years where they missed the playoffs entirely. Last year was just such a dismal year for them. the lockout Jordan year was such a dismal year for them. Of course, then they were rewarded with the 3rd overall pick, which they would use to select forward Jonathan Drouin. It was believed that Drouin was going to play this past year, but they didn't bring him up. They wanted him to play one more season with the Halifax Mooseheads of the Quebec Major Junior Hockey League to get stronger physically and mentally. And it's worked, and it's expected that Drouin is now going to come up and play as a 19-year-old. But we'll get into that more later on in the video. But the Lightning were just so good, even after Steven Stamkos got hurt. A lot of people thought that when Stamkos got hurt, the Lightning were finished. But the kids really stepped up and performed really well for the Lightning. Andre Palat went on to finish as the Lightning's leader in scoring. That does not include the time that Marty St. Louis spent there. And he was a nominee for Rookie of the Year. Tyler Johnson was also a top scorer on the team. He was one of their plus-minus leaders. He also was a nominee for Rookie of the Year. Both Andre Palat and Tyler Johnson finished as finalists, but of course they would lose out to Nathan MacKinnon of the Colorado Avalanche, and deservingly so, because Nathan MacKinnon was the best rookie in the NHL. Valtteri Filppula had a breakout year last year, had a career year. Victor Hedman had a breakout year. He finally lived up to his former 2nd overall draft status from 2009. Alex Killorn had a good year. Obviously, Steven Stamkos, when he was healthy, even with the time he missed, tied for the team lead in goals with 25. Valtteri Filppula was the other player that had 5. They have some good youngsters that came up as well. They have a young team coming up, and they're going to be really good. They're going to be a really good team in the near future. And one's got to think that maybe they could even battle for first place in the Atlantic Division. One's got to think that they're going to battle the Boston Bruins. But this year's postseason was really taken more as a learning experience. Now, one will tell you that if Ben Bishop were healthy, their series with the Montreal Canadiens would have been a whole lot different. But ultimately, the injury to Ben Bishop did get the best of them. Plus, with the young kids growing and learning, ultimately, the Montreal Canadiens would go on to sweep the Tampa Bay Lightning in the first round. I believe, if I'm correct, it was the only sweep in the playoff, or it was the only sweep in the playoffs. So the Lightning did ultimately have home ice advantage, but they were swept in the first round to the Montreal Canadiens. They, of course, went all the way to the Eastern Conference Finals and lost in 6 games to the Marty St. Louis and the New York Rangers. So the offseason comes around, and the Lightning set out to make it a big one, and it all started at the draft when they used the 19th overall selection to select New Jersey defenseman Anthony DeAngelo. He's going to be a good offensive defenseman in the future. And it didn't stop there. That wasn't even the first move they made. It really all started with a trade that they made with the Vancouver Canucks. A trade that they made to acquire defenseman Jason Garrison from the Vancouver Canucks. And he's going to help out their power play immensely. But that was the first move the Lightning made this off-season. They acquired defenseman Jason Garrison, the rights to forward Jeff Costello, and a 7th-round pick in 2015, and all that in exchange for a 2nd-round pick this year. So good move by the Lightning, and we'll talk more about that in a minute here. So let's now talk about the subtractions for the Lightning, because they let go of a lot of players. They were very active in the offseason. Goaltender Anders Lindback was let go. He went on to sign with the Dallas Stars. They let go of center Tom Pyatt. He went to the KHL to join his brother Taylor. Mike Koska is gone. He went on to sign with the New York Rangers. Cedric Desjardins, who had been in the minors for them for a long time, he also went on to sign with the New York Rangers. Defenseman Keith Awley, who I'm pretty sure had been a regular, who had been switched in and out as a regular of their lineup. They expected a lot more from him, but he went on to sign with the Edmonton Oilers. And then, of course, Ryan Malone is still out there as a pending free agent, along with defensemen Sammy Salo and Brian Lee. None of those guys are going to be back with the Tampa Bay Lightning in 2014-2015. For Ryan Malone, we all know what's going on with him. He was charged with DUI. The charges were recently dropped, but this guy has been causing nothing but trouble this offseason. We all know that. And then, of course, the Lightning did make some trades. They traded away some players. Like, for example, they went on to trade forward Teddy Purcell, who had been a key member of their top six for a couple of years now. They went on to trade him to the Edmonton Oilers, and in that trade, they acquired center Sam Gagner. So it was thought out that they were going to have Sam Gagner on their team. However, they didn't keep him for long, because then they traded both him and forward B.J. Crombeen to the Arizona Coyotes in exchange for a draft pick. And I think it was a 6th-round pick, which to me didn't make a whole lot of sense at all. I feel like they could have gotten much, much more with that deal. I think that was a trade that was poorly handled. And then they also dealt 4th-line center and penalty-killing machine Nate Thompson. They went on to trade him to the Anaheim Ducks in exchange for both a 4th and a 7th-round pick. So they got more in that deal than they did by trading Sam Gagner and B.J. Crombeen. So the Lightning did make a lot of trades this offseason, and one of them being the Jason Garrison trade. So they get Jason Garrison coming over from the Vancouver Canucks, and the rights to forward Jeff Costello and a 7th-round pick in exchange for a 2nd-round pick. With Jeff Costello, with the pick, you don't know what you're going to get with that. It's only a 7th-round pick. Jeff Costello, it was only acquiring his rights. Who knows if they're even going to sign this kid, or if they did already. But I'm pretty sure he's a college forward. I don't know much about him. But Jason Garrison is the big piece in all this. What he's expected to bring to the table that he didn't bring in Vancouver, and what he did bring in Florida, they're expecting him to hopefully get himself back to the way he was with the Florida Panthers. I mean, last year with the Vancouver Canucks, he had a much better year he had a much better year offensively. He tied last year with the Vancouver Canucks through 81 games played, 7 goals, a career high 26 assists, and he tied for a career high 33 points. But he was a career low -5, a career high 57 penalty minutes, and a career high 181 shots on goal. So it was kind of a tale of two seasons last year for Jason Garrison, but he's under that big contract, and they're really hoping he can get himself back to that 16 or 15 goal plateau that he was at when he was with the Florida Panthers. When he was with his final year with the Florida Panthers. Because you look at the Lightning from last year. They wanted to bulk up their defense a little bit because their defense is a little bit on the slow side. As far as their power play was concerned for last year, Their power play was 13th in the league. That's in the top 15, so it was okay. It wasn't terrible, but they felt that it could be better, and they felt that they needed another power play quarterback to take some pressure off of Victor Hedman, especially with Sammy Sallow not being re-signed. They're going to miss Sammy Sallow's big shot, so they need to bring in someone with just as big of a shot, if not bigger. Enter Jason Garrison. He'll be expected to help out their power play a bunch, and it gives them that heavy shot from the point back. Last year, as far as how they were taking penalties, the Lightning were actually a pretty disciplined team last year. They were 11th in the league, tied with the Florida Panthers, 10.3. Penalty killing last year for the Lightning. This is where the Tampa Bay Lightning struggled last year on the penalty kill. Jason Garrison's also a really good defensive defenseman. He can play defensively really well. More known for being a plus defenseman. Last year he was just on a bad team. So he'll hopefully help out their penalty kill as well. So good move by the Tampa Bay Lightning. I like Jason Garrison. I like what he brings to the table. He'll help them out a lot. As far as their other additions are concerned, they did bring in some minor players. That'll help out the Syracuse Crunch. Jerome Sampson coming over from the Winnipeg Jets affiliate, the St. John's Ice Caps. Matthew Corrente, a former 30th overall pick, never panned out to be what he was expected to be. He's coming over from the New Jersey Devils affiliate, the Albany Devils. And then forward Mike Blunden, who did play some games for the Montreal Canadiens last year. They get him from the Montreal Canadiens. He'll be toggled in and out of the lineup. He'll come up and play if someone gets injured, but he provides some depth. But some of the other big additions that the Lightning made this year, they brought in, thanks to Ryan Callahan, who, by the way, the Lightning did go on to re-sign. That was a big move by the Lightning this offseason. They re-signed forward Ryan Callahan to a 6-year deal, thus giving the Rangers a conditional conditional second-round pick. After it was thought out that Ryan Callahan wasn't even going to return to the Lightning this season, that was the big thoughts going on, that Ryan Callahan was going to be nothing more than a rental player and that he wasn't going to be back at the end of the year. But they liked the way he played, and he was rewarded with a 6-year contract. And in reward of bringing him back, the Callahan recommended, personally convinced 2 of his buddies from the New York Rangers to come over and join him with the Tampa Bay Lightning. And they were defenseman Anton Strawman and center Brian Boyle. Anton Strawman, it was kind of interesting that the Rangers didn't re-sign him, considering that they signed Dan Boyle to the same amount of money but less years. Strawman was signed to a pretty good contract last year. Last year, he really helped out the Rangers as far as puck possession. He's a good analytics type of player. He possesses the puck well. He's got good skating ability. He's really good in his own zone. Blocks shots. Makes things happen out there. He plays the body. And as a shutdown defenseman, last year he was really good. He just turned 28 on August 1st. You know, he's only 5'11", 190 pounds. And last year, through 81 games, only 1 goal, 12 assists, 13 points, but a +9 rating, only 26 penalty minutes and 104 shots on goal. And through 25 playoff games, he didn't have a goal, but he had 5 assists, a +4 rating, only 4 penalty minutes and 18 shots on goal. But again, with Anton Strawman, you don't look at numbers. You look at plus-minus because he's more of a shutdown defenseman. And overall, playoffs and regular season combined, he finishes a +13. It's really amazing the type of player that the Rangers turned him into. When he was with the Toronto Maple Leafs and the Columbus Blue Jackets, I mean, that 09-10 season was his best year offensively with the Columbus Blue Jackets. But he was always meant to be more of a shutdown defenseman, and the Rangers turned him into that, He's not the same floater that he was when he was with the Toronto Maple Leafs or the Columbus Blue Jackets. He's actually considered a good player now and a top 4 defenseman and a good defensive defenseman. The Lightning like what they're getting in him. They signed him to a 5-year deal. So that's the case with Anton Strawman. Then we get Brian Boyle here. Now, Brian Boyle left the New York Rangers because he wanted a bigger role than what he was getting in New York. He would have loved to have stayed in New York, but he wanted a bigger role than what he was getting with the Rangers. He wasn't going to be anything more than a fourth-line center, and he wanted something more than that. And originally, it was believed that he was going to go to the Vancouver Canucks, and that the Vancouver Canucks were going to go get him. But ultimately, Ryan Callahan convinced him to come to Tampa Bay, where he'll have a shot at playing on the third line, being their third-line center. He'll get a much bigger role in Tampa Bay, and he's an excellent penalty killer, face-off winner. That's what the Lightning's offseason was all about, improving their penalty killing, because their penalty killing was god-awful last year. Brian Boyle and Anton Strawman will both help in that category. Brian Boyle can also skate. He's a big body, and normally big bodies can't skate very well. Brian Boyle can skate very, very well. 6'7", 244 pounds. That's a lot of body right there. He's got pretty good hands as well. And he makes things happen out there. He really does. He likes to play the body. So he'll help out. He'll help out the Lightning very well. He'll help out the Lightning very much. So that's a good signing there. Same with Anton Strawman. And then other than that, they brought in goaltender Evgeny Nabokov. He's coming over from the New York Islanders. He's a veteran. They only signed him to a 1-year deal, which makes you think he'll probably only be there for this season. He'll help Ben Bishop out, who's expected to come back completely healthy and be ready for training camp. He'll add some wisdom, and he'll give some wisdom and experience to Ben Bishop. Good signing there. Also allows kids like Andrei Vasilevsky and Kristers Gudlevskis to develop a little bit more. And then the most recent signing they brought in veteran left winger Brendan Morrow. He's coming over from the St. Louis Blues. Brendan Morrow, not a top 6 forward like he used to be. He's not the same player that he used to be. Last year, though, I felt he played some pretty solid hockey last year. Through 71 games played, 13 goals, 12 assists, and 25 points, a +1 rating, and 56 shots on goal, though he did have 76 penalty minutes, which is a good amount of penalty minutes. But he only played in 2 playoff games, and he didn't do anything in those games except for 1 shot on goal. But again, he's nothing more than a third-line, fourth-line player now at this point in his career, but he brings leadership and wisdom. He brings leadership, wisdom, and experience to a young group. He's 35 years of age. He'll be 36 in January, but he'll help the Lightning out a lot. He'll bring some physical. He'll bring a nice physical presence to the team. He loves to play the body. Even at his age, he can still bring it. He can still play the body. He'll probably play on the. He'll probably play on the fourth line, most likely. But he'll help them out. I think he'll help them out, and he'll bring wisdom and experience to whatever kids he's put on a line with. So, a really good active offseason for the Tampa Bay Lightning, who just continue to get better, and what Steve Yzerman has been able to develop in his system is just something amazing. It's a Cinderella story that you can't just read to your kids. It's something you gotta witness for yourself. Because the Lightning were a Cinderella story last year, finishing as high as they did. Not as much of a Cinderella story as the Colorado Avalanche, but still a Cinderella story. And like the Colorado Avalanche, the Tampa Bay Lightning have something special developing, and you can tell that as long as Ben Bishop is able to still continue to play at his best, he was also rewarded with a contract extension because of how well he played. Then the Lightning are going to be a good team for a really long time. As we now take a look at some of the big questions for the Tampa Bay Lightning this offseason. Will Ben Bishop's show last season wasn't a fluke? Last year, everything was a career best for Ben Bishop. 37 wins, a .223 goals against average, and a .924 save percentage, and 5 shutouts. He missed the playoffs because of the arm injury, but he was a finalist for the Vezina Trophy. He signed a 2-year extension earlier in the month, and now he has to show that last season wasn't a fluke. He was signed to a bridge deal, but he was the MVP of the team last year. There's no question about it. I mean, one could maybe say that maybe Victor Hedman could have also been in the mix there, but I personally think it was Ben Bishop. Without him, they were just totally lost out there. They were not good without Ben Bishop in the lineup. So hopefully he can prove that last year wasn't a fluke, but we'll see. Can Tampa Bay's young players continue to develop? They have a lot of young players that came up last year. And as I said before, both Tyler Johnson and Andre Palat, their leading scorer, were finalists for the Calder Trophy. And they have other young players like defenseman Radko Gudas and forwards Nikita Kucherov, Alex Killorn, and J.T. Brown, who have also solidified their roster spots, and they're going to be good players one day. Radko Gudas was probably the best young physical presence out on the ice. Every time he came up, every time he was on the ice, he made something happen with his physical play, his hitting. He did take a lot of penalty minutes, and he did drop the gloves a significant amount. But with his hitting game, he made things happen, and he changed the pace of games. He's going to be a very valuable player for them in the future. Is Jonathan Drouin ready for the NHL? And that is a very important question. Last year, he missed 22 games with an injury, but despite that, he finished third in the Quebec Major Junior Hockey League in scoring with 108 points. He was just so good, and he's a much more mature player now than he was last season, both physically and mentally. That was the whole purpose of sending him down, but now he is expected to make a spot and play as a 19-year-old. He'll just be another really good youngster coming up, and he's going to make their team so much better, and he'll definitely make up for what they lost in Marty St. Louis. There's no doubt about that. Who will Steven Stamkos' line mates be? He pretty much played alongside everyone, from Ryan Callahan to Tyler Johnson to Alex Killorn when Marty St. Louis left. But if I were to take a guess, I mean, he could play with Ryan Callahan again. They were good together, but you got to think that Jonathan Drouin's going to come up and play on the same line as Steven Stamkos. Andre Palat is someone who could come up and play on that line. Tyler Johnson. It's going to be a very interesting thing to watch this season, to see who's going to play with Steven Stamkos. And then can the Lightning make it count in the playoffs? Well, first of all, they need to get that far first. And it's all going to depend on Ben Bishop. It's all going to depend on how well he's going to play. So those are some of the big questions for the Lightning. However, one of the questions that I also have for the Tampa Bay Lightning this season is, can these big additions that they made help out their penalty kill just like they think they will? All those off-season signings that they made this offseason were to help out the penalty kill. Anton Strawman, Brian Boyle, Brendan Morrow can kill penalties. Jason Garrison, he quarterbacks power plays, but he can also kill penalties as well. He's pretty much what they're not bringing back in Sammy Sallow, but he's a younger version of Sammy Sallow. And then, can their penalty killing be better this offseason? Can they be a better team defensively? Because that was a big issue for the Lightning last year. The weakness really was on defense going into the year because of how slow the defense was and is. It's not a very mobile defense. It's one of the slower defenses in the league, and if you get by them, there's no way they're catching up to you. So their defense has to be better, and if they want their penalty killing to be better. As that we now go ahead and take a look at the Lightning's projected lineup for this season. Up front, it's a really interesting lineup when you really look at it. I mean, Steven Stamkos obviously is the top line center. But this goes back to one of the bigger questions. Who's going to play on his line? Well, according to NHL.com, it could be Tyler Johnson manning the right side and Jonathan Drouin manning the left side. Now, Drouin can also play center. He can play both center and left wing. But he's much more effective on the wing. So, we'll see. That's going to be one of the big things to watch this offseason. This season and this training camp to see if Drouin can fit well with Stamkos. And if Tyler Johnson can come up and be on that line. Second line, there's no doubt that Valtteri Filppula, after what he did last year, he had a breakout season. He is their proven second line center. And Ryan Callahan did also spend a lot of time with him, and he was good with him as well. So there he'll be expected to play the right side on the second line. As far as who their left winger is going to be, gotta think that's going to be Andre Palat, their leading scorer from last year. Now, Palat could come up and play with Stamkos and Tyler Johnson as well, and Jonathan Drouin could play that second line, at least to start. But I think, and actually, I think that would be an interesting place to start. Drouin playing on that line and Palat playing with Johnson and Stamkos to start. We'll see, though. For now, though, it's Valtteri Filppula centering Ryan Callahan and Andre Palat on the second line, and Steven Stamkos centering Tyler Johnson and Jonathan Drouin on the top line. Third line, Brian Boyle is expected to be their third line center, as he wanted to be. He wanted to be a third line center. He wanted to be a difference maker. He wanted to get a bigger role. He would have loved to have stayed with the Rangers, but they were not willing to give him a bigger role. So now he has the chance to prove himself as a third-line center. He'll be expected to center J.T. Brown on the right, another good youngster coming up. He's going to get better. And Alex Killorn on the left side. He's a really good two-way player who can also play center. He's a Halifax native. He'll be 25 just before training camp begins. He was really effective last year. So Alex Killorn is expected to vie that third-line left wing spot. And then the fourth line. This is kind of where it gets interesting. Brett Connolly is expected to come up and play on the team full-time this year. And he's more of a right winger, but he's expected to move to center. I think he's played center in the past, but he's much more effective as a right winger. But he's expected to center Nikita Kucherov on the right and Brendan Morrow on the left, with Jerome Sampson being the 13th forward. Now, Nikita Kucherov to me is an interesting one because I always saw this guy as more of a top 6 player. I think he's going to be a top 6 player in the future. Last year when he came up, he was so good for the Lightning. He brings so much skill and speed. He's an off-winger, and he's just a great player. He's going to be one heck of a player for the Lightning in the future. but he may be the guy who may have to start small and play on the fourth line. Now, he could easily move a guy like JT Brown to that line if he plays really well, but we'll see. But overall, I think this is an interesting fourth line. I think this fourth line, I feel like a guy like Alex Killorn should be put on that line, or even Brian Boyle should. I think Brian Boyle is a very overrated player at times. I don't think he belongs as on the third line. I think the fourth line was perfect for him. I think you got to move a guy like Alex Killorn to the center spot on the third line. But I don't know. That just might be me talking. Kucherov to me could play either the right wing side or the left wing side, but we'll see. Brendan Morrow definitely belongs on that fourth line, and Brett Connolly probably does as well. Until he proves better, he belongs there until he's proven better. Former 6th overall pick from 2010. He really hasn't panned out quite yet to be the player that they maybe are hoping he does eventually become, but we'll see. It's going to be one interesting season in Tampa Bay up front. But overall, this is a very deep group of forwards. I love this group of forwards. This forward core is worthy of a playoff spot. On defense, it's pretty much the same defense as it was last year. It pretty much is the same defense as it was last year, minus Sammy Sallow and minus Mike Koska. I think it's actually slightly better than it was last year, too. I think they made the necessary improvements and added a little bit more speed and a little bit more jump on that blue line. What's interesting, though, is that they have Anton Strawman expected to play on the top defense pair with Victor Hedman. That, I think, is a bit interesting. I think Anton Strawman is more of a second pair defenseman rather than a top pair defenseman, but he's going to be given every opportunity to prove himself, as is Brian Boyle. So, we'll see. For now, though, Victor Hedman expected to play with his fellow Swede, Anton Strawman, on the top pair. Matt Carl will probably flank the second pair with Radko Gudas as his partner. Matt Carl had a really good year last year, and so did Radko Gudas. They'll be expected to play together. And then on the third pair, Jason Garrison will probably play with Eric Brewer, while Andre Schuster and Mark Barberio man the 7th and 8th spots on defense. Andre Schuster really came up last year and was really effective, but when he played, he's a shutdown defenseman, big defenseman, 6'8", 225 pounds. He's the biggest player on the team. He'll be 24 in November. And he has the potential to play more and be a regular in the lineup, but he's probably going to have to prove himself a little bit better. And then Mark Barberio. When Mark Barberio came up, he was really good when he first came up. Didn't do as much down the stretch. So those two guys are going to battle for spots. Eric Brewer, he's 35 years of age, so who knows? Maybe he underachieves this year. And a guy like Schuster would be the more likely one, but Schuster maybe kicks him out of the lineup, and it adds more balance on the blue line. We'll see, though. The Lightning defense, I think this group of defensemen is really good. I don't think it's the best defense core in the league, but it's good. It's definitely better than last year, and with Strawman back there, with both Strawman and Garrison back there, this defense group gets just a little bit faster. Radko Gudas is pretty fast as well, so it's not as slow as it was last year for sure. The big concern for me for the Lightning is in goal. Even as good as Ben Bishop was last year, he's expected to be the starter, and Evgeny Nabokov is obviously going to be the backup. as good as they were, as good as Bishop was last year, and as capable a backup as Nabokov can be, you still gotta kind of be concerned a bit with the injury that he suffered. For 6'7", 214 pounds, he's 27 years of age. He'll be 28 in November. But you gotta really, for the Lightning, they really gotta hope that Bishop can perform because, even though he had as good a record as he did suffer that injury, and you never know with goaltenders, Injuries can really hurt goaltenders a lot more than it can for forwards and defensemen sometimes. So hopefully Bishop can come back and find his place, because Evgeny Nabokov's definitely not a starter anymore. Nabokov, he's 39 years of age. Although he did finish with a winning record last year through 40 games, 15 wins, 14 losses, and 8 overtime losses with 4 shutouts, a .905 save percentage, and a .274 goals against average. So it's not like he was completely terrible last year, but he's definitely not a starter anymore. And now he is 39. He's older. The bones are getting weaker. So makes one think, Overall, though, I think Bishop will be fine, but that still is something that could be a concern going into the year. Even the defense slightly. I don't think there's anything wrong with this forward core, except that they other than Brendan Morrow, they really are not that physical. That could actually be the big weakness for the Lightning this year because of all these skilled players coming up. There may not be enough room for physicality on the team, and that could hurt the team down the stretch. That is a big weakness, and it's something that could get them beaten up out there for sure. That's one area I think where they'll miss B.J. Crombeen. They'll miss his physicality level. Other players that could make the lineup as well. Richard Panik, he came up last year and was great. Maybe not great, but was really good. He's still a young player. He'll be 24 in February. He's expected to come up eventually and be a good player. Vladislav Nemesnikov is another one. That can come up and become a good player for them. That's up front. On defense, Slater Kukuk and Jean-Philippe Cote. J.P. Cote was pretty good in the opportunities he got last year, but he is 32 years old, so one makes you think that may be a little bit too late. It may be a little too late for him, to be a full-time player, but you never know. And then in goal, they have Kristers Gudlevskis, who could come up and be a really good player for them. And they still have Andrei Vasilevsky down there. He might be the best goalie prospect in the world. So this is going to be one interesting season for the Tampa Bay Lightning and their prospects. As we now go and take a look at the Lightning's top 10 prospects, obviously Jonathan Drouin is number one. There's no doubt about it. He's not only the number one prospect for the Tampa Bay Lightning, but he's probably the number one prospect in the world right now. He's probably the number one prospect overall for all 30 NHL teams. He is going to come up, and he is just going to be a force to be reckoned with. He's a guy who many people still believe he should have played last year. 29 goals, 79 assists, and 108 points, and a plus 50 through 46 games played last year for the Halifax Mooseheads of the Quebec Major Junior Hockey League. Andrei Vasilevsky, he's number 2. Vladislav Nemesnikov, number 3. Slater Kukuk, number 4. Adam Ernie is another good player who's going to come up at some point and be a good two-way player for them. He's number 5. Anthony DeAngelo, their first-round pick from this year, number 6. Adam Wilcox, he's number 7. Henry Ikonen, number 8. Cedric Paquette, who came up and played pretty well, he's number 9. And Luke Witkowski is number 10. This is a very deep prospect pool for the Tampa Bay Lightning. They have a lot of NHL-ready players. It's the perfect mix, which is why I actually think this might have just beaten the Buffalo Sabres for the best prospect pool in the Atlantic Division so far. They probably have now officially have the best prospect pool in the Atlantic Division. I mean, this is a really good top 10 prospect pool. And they're just loaded. It's a great situation to be in right now if you're the Tampa Bay Lightning. A lot of great prospects in the system that are going to come up in the future. And great youngsters already on the team. It's the perfect mix. But when you look at it, the number one prospect, in my opinion, when really looking at it, I think when I did the Detroit Red Wings, looking past a guy like Anthony Mantha was really a stretch. When it comes to the Lightning, as deep as their prospect pool is, and really you could pick anyone, with Jonathan Drouin, it's a completely different story. There's just no looking past it. For me to not pick Jonathan Drouin as my guy would be insane. So, in result, my top prospect is their number one prospect, left winger, Jonathan Drouin. This guy is just an absolute stud. He's got unreal hands, great passing ability, more of a playmaker than a goal scorer, although he has shown signs that he can score goals. And this guy, I personally feel like that he could have been the number one overall pick potentially. He was the leading scorer in the Quebec Major Junior Hockey League that year, that draft year. He had more points than Nathan MacKinnon, but Nathan MacKinnon had more points in that span of time. He was injured a lot of the season. So it's going to be an interesting competition between Nathan MacKinnon and Jonathan Drouin, two great friends and former Halifax teammates now. McKinnon's on the Avalanche, Drouin's on the Lightning. So, this is going to be an interesting year to watch for the Tampa Bay Lightning, and Jonathan Drouin's just going to make it all the more fun. So, Jonathan Drouin, he is the guy. He is my number one prospect, and he is the number one prospect for the Tampa Bay Lightning. Now, in order for the Tampa Bay Lightning to not get back into the playoffs this year and maybe have a chance at going farther in the playoffs, the player, in my opinion, who has to be better this season for the Tampa Bay Lightning in order to go farther in the playoffs, Ben Bishop is obviously an option because he was so good last year, but he's coming off an injury, so you got to kind of look at Ben Bishop a little bit, but he's not the guy that I'm going to choose. This is actually kind of a hard choice, believe it or not. The Lightning are kind of a harder team to choose with, but ultimately, I think the player that needs to be better this year, believe it or not, has to be Ryan Callahan. And why am I saying Ryan Callahan? Well, he's still relatively young at 29. He won't be 30 till March. And though he was really good when he came over from the Lightning last year during the regular season, for him as a whole, for his season as a whole, through 65 games played combined with the Rangers and the Lightning, 17 goals, 19 assists, 36 points, only a +1 rating, 24 penalty minutes. He was pretty clean last year, which is a good thing. 163 penalty 163 shots on goal. And then through the playoffs last year, he played all 4 games, not a single point. However, I will admit that he was robbed of a goal in Game 3. He should have had one, but he had a goal in Game 3 that should have counted, but it didn't. He was a -2, and though he didn't have any penalty minutes, he only had 5 shots on goal. And last year, even when in his time with the Rangers, serving as their captain before coming over, Steven Stamkos, obviously the captain now in Tampa Bay, he was given the C right when he came back from injury after St. Louis had left. Callahan's not the captain anymore. He's no longer the heart of the team. He's now in a system with the Rangers. He was the heart of the team. Now with the Tampa Bay Lightning, he's pretty much just another guy out there. But last year under Alain Vigneault's system, when he was with the Rangers still, he did not look like Ryan Callahan. He really fell out of favor. He wasn't the physical presence that he had been in past years. He didn't really play like Ryan Callahan. Oh, yeah. And he had problems with injuries a lot of the time last year. This is a really good player with really good hands, really effective on the power play. But the best thing about him is his work ethic. He works hard to get into the offensive zone. He pressures the opposition. He hits. He'll drop the gloves occasionally. And he really didn't do a lot of that last year. Last year was kind of an unmotivated type of season for Ryan Callahan. He did look better when he got to the Lightning, but then he kind of looked like the Ryan Callahan we saw with the Rangers in the playoffs. So that is why, to me, Callahan has to be that physical presence again, and that is why Ryan Callahan is the player that I think needs to be better this season in order for the Lightning to have a chance, especially considering Ryan Callahan is playing on the top six this year rather than on the third line, which is where he was with the Rangers. Overall, are the Tampa Bay Lightning a playoff team? I think they are. I mean, look at that offense. I mean, they have Steven Stamkos coming back completely healthy. They have Ben Bishop coming back completely healthy. You know, with all these young kids coming up, Jonathan Drouin's going to come up. He's going to be a force. You look at all these players. All these youngsters other than Drouin and Stamkos. Tyler Johnson, Andre Palat, Alex Killorn, JT Brown, Brett Connolly, Nikita Kucherov. That's just on offense. Defense, they still got Victor Hedman back there, but they also have Radko Gudas coming up. He's good. Andre Suster, if he can solidify a spot in the lineup. And then, you know, Richard Panik, Slater Kukuk, Vlaslav Nemesnikov, Christos Gudlevskis, Andrei Vasilevsky. Not only have they built something tremendous in already playing, but in their system as well. And they have a lot of options to go with, even if they do get injury prone. They have a lot of youngsters who could come up and have the potential to become really good players. I mean, there's no looking past it with the Lightning. Now, obviously, again, there may be some concerns about their physical play because Brendan Morrow is pretty much going to be the guy acting as their physical presence, unless, of course, Ryan Callahan could get back to that as well. Brian Boyle can play physical too, but he's more of a defensive forward. You know, this Lightning team really doesn't have a true fourth line, and in ways that can be a bad thing. That could be a bad thing because all of a sudden now the Lightning don't have anybody that, you know, with the experience to play physical and somebody who's going to prevent them from getting beaten up in the playoffs. This is a great lineup for the regular season. There's no doubt about it. And because of how stacked this lineup is, they actually have the potential to compete with the Boston Bruins for the Atlantic Division title this year. I don't think the Bruins have the Atlantic Division title locked this year because the Tampa Bay Lightning are a team on the rise, and they could easily take it. However, it's what they do with it once they get to the playoffs that's going to be the big question. Can they make it count in the playoffs, going back to the fifth question? It's hard to say because, again, they don't have a very physical lineup now. With the loss of B.J. Crombie, they don't have a true fourth line anymore. So that's a good thing in the sense that they have now more scoring, but it's bad in the sense that now they're going to get pummeled out there unless guys like Brendan Morrow, like Brian Boyle, and like Ryan Callahan could really be physical out there. Brett Connolly as well. I've heard he can be a really physical player at times. So for the Tampa Bay Lightning, it's really going to be up to them to decide their own fate this year. Radko Gudas, he's going to have to be as physical as he was last year, but at the same time, you don't like defensemen being your enforcers. So, I think down the road, I can see the Lightning maybe making a trade for some kind of enforcer, maybe two. But we'll see. This will be an interesting season for the Tampa Bay Lightning. I think their lack of physicality is going to catch up to them in the playoffs, but I still think they're going to make it to the playoffs. So I think it's a stacked lineup, and they have the potential to, as far as regular season goes, they have the potential to compete with the Boston Bruins for the Atlantic Division. Do I think they will win the Atlantic Division? Probably not. I still think you can never deny the Boston Bruins. I think they're still the best team in the division. But don't count the Lightning out because they're right on their tail. So yes, regardless of if they win the division or not, and regardless of their lack of physicality, that's something that really doesn't hurt you till the playoffs. So yes, the Tampa Bay Lightning are a playoff team this year. They will be back in the playoffs this year. And that'll do it for episode 154 of Hockey on the Spot. Be sure to join me again tomorrow when we finish up the Atlantic Division, when we talk about the Boston Bruins. So until then, this has been Hockey on the Spot with Brandon Barenfeld. I'm Brandon Barenfeld. Thank you all for joining me today, and I'll see you all again tomorrow. Thank you all, and have a great day.